So our next speaker is Tim White from Yale, and he has a title, He Mapped the Ancient Seas and Fathomed the Geologic Past.
So I think I'm the only one that got the memo about the uniform for today. It's supposed to be dark blue. So he mapped the ancient seas and fathomed the geologic past. This is a quote from James Conant, who was president of Harvard College in 1934. He presented Charles Schuchert, a paleontologist at Yale, with an honorary doctorate. What's funny about that day is when Schuchert received that degree, Albert Einstein was also a member of that class. And he received his degree and gave this very eloquent speech about his research and where the world was headed with World War II on the horizon. And when Schuchert received his honorary doctorate, he stood up and said something like, "Oh, I wasn't aware I was supposed to say anything, so I'm not," and turned around and sat down. But it's kind of a reflection of Charles Schuchert. He grew up in the Cincinnati area, had an 8th grade education, never attended college, but became an amateur fossil collector and amassed an enormous collection of brachiopods and invertebrates from the Cincinnati area. And so well known that James Hall, the eminent paleontologist from New York, reached out to Schuchert to buy his collection. And Schuchert was always a businessman and said, no way, but you can hire me. And that's kind of how he got his career started in paleontology. In 1904, Charles Schuchert was called to Yale, as they used to say, to be the professor of historical geology and invertebrate paleontology. And at the age of 46 years old, he set foot into a Yale undergraduate classroom. And as he said in his notes and things, this was the first time he had ever been in a classroom, a college classroom. And so he was completely overwhelmed. Here he had, 20 of the young, brightest, minds around interested in geology, and he didn't know how to relate to them. He was teaching a course on regional North American stratigraphy, and he couldn't convey this vast, information and knowledge that he had acquired over 40-something years of collecting fossils. In his own notes, he referred to it as an utter disaster, went home dejected, had to rethink how was he going to convey this information. And after 2 or 3 lectures, of failure, he kind of stumbled on this idea of, he went to the classroom and actually painted a map of North America on the blackboard. And then started talking about his collections, the collections from the Peabody, the collections from the Smithsonian where he had worked as well. And started plotting on there terrestrial occurrences of different kinds of insect fossils, vertebrates, marine fossils. And so suddenly he found a way to try to reach these students. This is one of about 200 draft maps that we have in the Invert Paleo archives at Peabody. And this is the western interior, the Cretaceous Western Interior Seaway, well known in the geological world. I'm always kind of struck by these maps and by Schuchert's research because, you talk to evolutionary biologists today, you talk to paleontologists, geologists, everybody refers to paleogeography at some point, in their research when they look back at geologic time and how did organisms evolve and what were the continents like. And so I'm always kind of been struck by that. Let's see, if we could blow this up and look at this very, very closely, you can see a lot of hand annotations, and that's what makes this very interesting. Is you can see that Charles Schuchert he's referencing occurrence data from the literature. He's referring to Handler's 1897 says insects here. Bose 1900 says Jurassic ammonites here. Ha! Don't believe it. But all these nice kind of side references, and then of course he's referring to his collections at the Peabody. And what it always strikes me about is here we have this nice TCN grant, the Cretaceous world. They're mixing data, they're using information from the paleobiology database, which is based on occurrence data from the literature, and it's based on specimens from museum collections. It always just makes me sit and wonder, what would Charles Schuchert do, if he had these resources that we have today? I think he's a great example of, somebody who always thought outside of the bubble and continue to try to push himself despite whatever limitations he thought he had. Thanks.